To think you know the story of John F. Kennedy's assassination, a lone gunman, 3 shots, a grieving widow in a pink suit. Well, buckle up, because the truth is so much worse than the black and white textbook version you've heard. This wasn't just a president being shot, it was a public execution staged in front of the world, a spectacle of horror so shocking that people still argue today whether the full story has ever been told. Kennedy wasn't just a politician, he was America's golden boy. Young, handsome, charismatic, he stood at podiums and made the country believe again. His wife Jackie was a fashion icon, his kids played on the White House floor, and reporters dubbed it Camelot. The perfect fairy tale. But here's the sickest twist. Behind that dream image, Kennedy was surrounded by enemies who wanted him destroyed. The mafia whispered revenge after Robert Kennedy cracked down on organized crime. The CIA boiled with rage over Cuba. Segregationists in the South called him a traitor. Even his own military leaders doubted his backbone. And the craziest part? Kennedy knew the risks and still chose to ride openly in a city that despised him. On November 22, 1963, the motorcade rolled out of Love Field. The sun was bright, the crowds were ecstatic, Jackie glowing in her pink Chanel suit. Smiles, laughter, waves. But wait, it gets worse. The route forced the president's car to crawl through Dealey Plaza, boxed in by tall buildings and open windows. It wasn't just a parade route, it was the perfect kill zone. And here's the horrifying cliffhanger. When the first shot cracked through the air, no one even realized it was the beginning of the end. Kennedy looked untouchable, but was he really? To the public, he was the closest thing America ever had to royalty. But beneath the glittering image, the truth was far uglier. His victory in 1960, a razor-thin margin. And the craziest part? Whispers claimed the mob swung the election for him. Chicago votes mysteriously appeared at just the right time, delivered by crime bosses who expected payback. But wait, it gets worse. Instead of rewarding them, Kennedy unleashed his brother Robert as Attorney General, and Robert made it his mission to dismantle organized crime. Wiretaps, indictments, headlines. The very men who believed they put Kennedy in the White House suddenly wanted him buried. And they weren't the only ones. The CIA burned with fury after the Bay of Pigs disaster. To them, Kennedy was weak, a man who embarrassed America on the world stage. The Pentagon? Furious, he refused to launch all-out war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Southern segregationists? They cursed his name for backing civil rights. Every step Kennedy took forward created a new enemy, and enemies don't just sit and wait. So here's the sickest twist. While Kennedy was being worshipped by crowds, the most dangerous people in America were sharpening their knives. He wasn't just a president with critics. He was a target with a bullseye painted on his back. And then came the calendar date no one could ignore. Dallas. A city known for its hostility, its extremists, its open threats against him. So when Kennedy smiled and agreed to ride through Dallas in an open car, the question wasn't if something would happen, but how bad it would be. Why Dallas? Why this city, of all places? If Kennedy's presidency was Camelot, then Dallas was the kingdom's darkest shadow. On the surface, it was just another campaign stop. But dig deeper, and you'll find a city boiling with rage. Flyers were plastered across Dallas, branding Kennedy a traitor. Newspaper ads mocked him as a coward. And the craziest part? Extremists in Texas weren't just critical of Kennedy, they openly wished him dead. The Secret Service knew the risks. Reports described Dallas as hostile, unpredictable, dangerous. So why didn't they cancel? Why didn't they tighten security? Why did they let the motorcade be published in advance, complete with the exact route through Dealey Plaza? But wait, it gets worse. The route forced Kennedy's car to slow down, boxed in by tall buildings and overlooked by dozens of open windows. Anyone with a rifle had the perfect shot. Kennedy himself wasn't worried. He wanted the roof down, the crowds close, the cameras rolling. Jackie looked flawless in her pink Chanel suit, dazzling the press. To the cheering thousands, it felt like a festival. But from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, it looked like something else. a hunting ground. Dallas wasn't just a stop on the campaign trail. It was a trap, and everyone could feel it. Even the local police worried the president was driving straight into danger. And here's the sickest twist. As the motorcade rolled closer to Dealey Plaza, thousands of eyes looked up at Kennedy. But one pair of eyes was staring down a rifle scope. It looked like a parade, but in reality, it was a moving coffin. On November 22, 1963, the presidential motorcade left Love Field Airport and glided through Dallas. Kennedy sat high in the back of his open-top Lincoln Continental, Jackie beside him, Governor John Connally in front. The chrome sparkled in the Texas sun. Crowds pressed in from every angle, cheering wildly, snapping photos, children waving tiny flags. To them, it felt like history in the making. But the darkest part, history was about to be written in blood. Secret Service agents jogged alongside the car, but their coverage was thin. Windows stretched endlessly above the route. Balconies, rooftops, open offices, all offering a perfect line of sight to the president's exposed body. How could anyone think this was safe? The shocking truth? Kennedy wasn't protected. He was paraded like a target. And it gets stranger. The chosen route forced the car to slow to a crawl inside Dealey Plaza. Sharp turns, bottlenecks, and towering buildings all around. The Texas School Book Depository loomed above with a window on the 6th floor left open. Was it an oversight? Or something far worse? From Jackie's seat, it looked like a fairy tale moment. A smiling husband, adoring crowds, the thrill of victory. But through the crosshairs of a rifle, it looked like something else. The perfect shot. Here's the nightmare fuel. Thousands of people watched the motorcade pass, clapping and cheering, completely unaware that in a matter of seconds those cheers would be replaced with screams. What does it sound like when a nation's dream explodes? At 12:30 p.m., the motorcade rolled through Dealey Plaza. Crowds clapped, kids waved flags, cameras whirred. Then a crack, sharp, metallic, echoing between the buildings. Some people laughed nervously, thinking it was fireworks. Others thought it was a motorcycle backfiring. But the chilling reality? It was the sound of the first bullet slicing into history. Kennedy stiffened. His hands flew toward his throat, his face contorted with shock. Jackie turned, confused, searching for the source of the noise. Governor Connally twisted in his seat, eyes wide. And here's the part nobody expected. Instead of ducking, many people froze. The sound had come so fast, from so many directions, that no one knew what was happening. Secret Service agents scanned the rooftops. Was the shooter in the book depository? The grassy knoll? A bridge ahead? Too many angles, too many possibilities, and every second lost meant another chance for the killer to fire again. The horrifying truth? Kennedy was a sitting target, and the predator hadn't finished. Then came the second crack, louder, sharper, unmistakable. This time, there was no doubt. Governor Connally cried out, his body jerking violently as blood sprayed across the seats. The crowd erupted into chaos. Screams pierced the air, people dropped to the ground, children sobbed in terror. And still, the motorcade rolled forward, crawling helplessly through the trap. Kennedy slumped lower, clutching his throat, Jackie desperately trying to understand what was happening. The darkest detail? The third shot hadn't even been fired yet, and that was the one that would end Camelot forever. And then, it happened, the shot that ripped history in half. The third crack split the air, louder than the rest, echoing through Dealey Plaza like thunder. In the back of the limousine, John F. Kennedy's head snapped violently. The gruesome truth? The bullet shattered his skull in front of thousands of witnesses and millions more who would watch the footage later. Jackie screamed. She lunged toward her husband, her pink suit instantly soaked in blood. In shock, she climbed onto the back of the limousine, desperate, as if trying to gather the fragments of his shattered life. Here's the nightmare fuel. The First Lady of the United States was literally clawing at the car, scooping pieces of her husband's brain with trembling hands. The Secret Service agent, Clint Hill, sprinted toward the car, leaping onto the back as Jackie tried to climb out. He shoved her back into the seat, covering the President and First Lady with his body. But the horror couldn't be undone. The image of Camelot, the dream of a young, vibrant president, had just exploded across the pavement. The crowd was in shock. Some screamed, others fainted. Many ran aimlessly, convinced more bullets were coming. On the grassy knoll, people pointed, swore they saw smoke, claimed there was a second shooter. In seconds, chaos replaced celebration. But the chilling part? Even as the motorcade sped away, Kennedy wasn't yet declared dead. There was still a desperate hope, a fragile lie, that somehow doctors at Parkland Hospital could perform a miracle. Imagine standing in a cheering crowd one moment and the next, watching the president's head explode in front of you. That was Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963. The celebration turned into hysteria in seconds. Parents threw their children to the ground. People screamed, trampled, fainted. Some ran blindly, others froze in shock. And the chilling detail, thousands of eyes had just witnessed the crime of the century, and no two people could agree on what they saw. Some swore the shots came from the Texas school book depository. Others pointed to the grassy knoll, convinced they saw smoke and a flash. A few even thought bullets came from the overpass ahead. The terrifying question: how could so many people hear the same 3 shots, but remember them coming from completely different places? Police officers sprinted in every direction. Some stormed the book depository, others charged the knoll. But the shooter or shooters had already vanished. In the chaos, witnesses contradicted each other, rumors spread like wildfire, and conspiracy was born in real time. The darkest irony? Nobody in that moment trusted what they saw, not even themselves. Meanwhile, the motorcade roared away, leaving Dealey Plaza behind in confusion and blood. But the echoes of those gunshots lingered. Eyewitnesses debated, argued, swore on their lives that the official story couldn't be right. And those first, frantic moments in Dallas would fuel 60 years of suspicion. But here's the disturbing twist. While the crowd argued about where the shots came from, the President of the United States was fighting for his life just a few miles away. The scene was chaos, but the motorcade didn't stop. It couldn't. Agents screamed at the driver to hit the gas. The open-top Lincoln lurched forward, tires screeching, leaving behind the carnage of Dealey Plaza. Jackie clung to her husband's shattered body, her pink suit drenched in blood. Secret Service agent Clint Hill lay stretched across the trunk, shielding them both with his own body. The haunting truth? The President of the United States was slumped in the back seat, dying in his wife's arms, as the world's most powerful government raced through traffic with no plan, no protection, and no certainty he was even alive. The motorcade roared through red lights, sirens wailing, motorcycles clearing the path. Dallas residents stood frozen on sidewalks, watching in confusion as the president's limousine streaked past. Here's the nightmare detail. In the frantic rush, Jackie whispered prayers into her husband's ear, even as she held fragments of his skull in her trembling hands. Inside the car, Kennedy's condition was dire. Blood poured from his wounds, his breathing shallow, his eyes glazed. Governor Connolly, hit in the chest, slumped forward, groaning in agony. The back seat of the limousine was a scene from a war zone. But it wasn't a battlefield, it was the streets of America. Parkland Hospital was just minutes away. But the doctors waiting there had no idea what was about to roll through their doors. They expected gunshot victims. They didn't expect the President of the United States covered in blood, seconds from death. And the chilling part? By the time the car screeched to a halt outside the ER, it was already too late. When the President's limousine screeched to a stop outside Parkland Hospital, chaos erupted. Secret Service agents yanked open the doors, shouting for help. Jackie refused to let go, cradling her husband's shattered head, her face blank with shock. The horrific truth. The First Lady of the United States walked into the emergency room covered head to toe in her husband's blood, carrying pieces of him in her hands. Doctors and nurses rushed to Trauma Room 1. They had seen gunshot wounds before, but never like this. Kennedy's throat gaped open, his skull blown apart, brain tissue exposed. The shocking part? Even seasoned trauma surgeons gasped and turned pale. Still, they went to work. Chest compressions, oxygen, IV fluids. They tried everything. But deep down, most of them knew. This wasn't a rescue. It was a ritual of desperation. Governor Connolly, gravely wounded, groaned from another room. Nurses sprinted between patients, the hospital filling with screams and the metallic stench of blood. And here's the nightmare detail. At one point, a priest was called to perform last rites while doctors were still operating because they already knew there was no saving him. At 1:00 p.m., after 30 desperate minutes, the announcement came. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was dead. Nurses cried. Agents collapsed into chairs, staring blankly. Jackie, her suit soaked in blood, whispered quietly, refusing to change her clothes. I want them to see what they did to Jack, but the chilling twist? Even as Kennedy's death was confirmed inside Parkland, the hunt outside had already begun, and the city of Dallas was about to find its villain. At 1:33 p.m., the world stopped. The doors of Parkland Hospital swung open, and a doctor stepped forward, his face pale, his voice trembling. The President of the United States is dead, just like that. The illusion of Camelot, the dream of a young leader, the hope of a generation was shattered. The haunting truth? It wasn't just Kennedy that died that day. It was America's innocence. Inside the hospital, Jackie stood in shock. Her pink Chanel suit, once a symbol of glamour, was now soaked in blood and gore. Nurses begged her to change. She refused. The most chilling part? She whispered, No, I want them to see what they did. Every camera that captured her that afternoon showed not just grief, but defiance. A widow wearing her husband's blood as a statement to the world. Outside, the nation froze. Radios crackled. Televisions interrupted broadcasts. People collapsed in the streets, crying, screaming, praying. Strangers hugged each other in disbelief. And the darkest detail? Millions learned about Kennedy's death not from officials, but from Walter Cronkite's trembling voice on live TV, barely able to hold back tears. The shockwaves didn't stop in America. London rang church bells. Paris fell silent. The Kremlin celebrated quietly behind closed doors. The world was watching and waiting for answers. Who could have done this? Why Dallas? And most importantly, was the killer still out there? But here's the twist that sent America spiraling. Within just hours, the police already had a name, and the suspect wasn't a shadowy foreign assassin. It was a 24-year-old nobody named Lee Harvey Oswald. Within minutes of Kennedy's death, Dallas became a city under siege. Police swarmed Dealey Plaza, searching every rooftop, every alley, every shadow. Witnesses screamed conflicting stories. Some swore they saw smoke from the grassy knoll. Others pointed to the Texas school book depository. But the disturbing truth? Nobody knew for sure where the shots had come from, or if the gunman was already escaping right under their noses. Inside the book depository, officers combed the upper floors. On the 6th, they found a rifle propped against a window, spent shell casings scattered on the floor. The weapon, a cheap mail-order Italian Carcano rifle. The kind nobody expected to change the course of history. And here's the chilling twist. The fingerprints on it would soon point to a man most Americans had never even heard of. Lee Harvey Oswald, 24 years old. A former Marine, a drifter, a defector who once lived in the Soviet Union. He worked in the book depository stacking boxes, earning just over $1 an hour. To the outside world, he was a nobody. So how did this invisible man suddenly become the alleged assassin of the President of the United States? Police fanned out. Within hours, Oswald had already shot and killed a Dallas police officer named J.D. Tippit while trying to flee. That made him public enemy number one. Minutes later, he was cornered in a dingy movie theater, dragged out screaming as the cameras flashed. But the most unsettling part? As Oswald was hauled away, he shouted two words that ignited decades of suspicion. I'm a patsy. Imagine being a 24-year-old nobody and overnight you're branded the killer of the President of the United States. That was Lee Harvey Oswald on November 22, 1963. Dragged from a Dallas movie theater, fists clenched, eyes wild, he was shoved into the back of a police car as reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved in his face. And the chilling truth? Before the evidence was even analyzed, Oswald was already convicted in the court of public opinion. At police headquarters, the questioning began. Officers grilled him about the rifle, the shell casings, the shooting of Officer Tippit. Oswald denied everything. He didn't just deny it, he declared himself a victim. "I'm a patsy," he shouted, insisting he was being framed. Was it a desperate lie from a cornered man? Or was there something more behind his words? Meanwhile, the media circus outside the station was unlike anything America had ever seen. Hundreds of reporters camped outside, desperate for any scrap of information. Television crews captured every movement, every word. Here's the disturbing detail. Oswald wasn't hidden. He was paraded through crowded hallways, exposed to cameras, shouted at by strangers, as if officials wanted the world to see him suffer. But questions mounted fast. Why did a broke warehouse worker own a foreign rifle? Why had he once defected to the Soviet Union? Why did he return to America without punishment? And most importantly, was he really capable of pulling this off alone? The shocking twist? Oswald wouldn't live long enough to answer a single one of those questions. Just when America thought it had its villain, the story twisted into something even darker. On November 24, 1963, 2 days after the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald was set to be transferred from police headquarters to the county jail. Reporters crowded the basement, cameras rolled live. Millions tuned in. And the detail that still haunts America? They watched a murder happen on television in real time. As Oswald shuffled forward, handcuffed, flanked by detectives, a man suddenly lunged from the crowd. A gun flashed. A single shot rang out. Oswald crumpled to the ground, clutching his stomach. The killer was Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner with murky mob connections and a violent temper. The shocking truth? In the space of 2 seconds, the only suspect in the president's murder was silenced forever. Reporters screamed. Police scrambled. Cameras zoomed in on Oswald writhing on the floor. Millions of viewers gasped from their living rooms, witnessing what looked less like justice and more like a cover-up. And the disturbing question? Why was Ruby, armed with a revolver, able to walk right into a secure police transfer? Ruby later claimed it was about revenge, that he couldn't stand Jackie Kennedy suffering through a trial. But few believed that. Ruby had ties to organized crime. He ran shady clubs. He owed debts. And here's the nightmare fuel. By killing Oswald, Ruby ensured the world would never hear the alleged assassin's full story. The man who could have explained Dallas was gone, and with him, the truth may have been buried. But the craziest part, instead of ending the nightmare, Ruby's bullet only opened a deeper abyss, one filled with theories, lies, and government secrets. With Oswald dead, America demanded answers. Who killed the president? Why Dallas? Was it a conspiracy, or the act of a lone madman? To calm the chaos, President Lyndon Johnson created the Warren Commission, a panel of 7 men tasked with writing the official story of Kennedy's assassination. But the most disturbing part? Their conclusion left more questions than it answered. The report claimed Lee Harvey Oswald acted entirely alone. No mafia, no CIA, no Soviets. Just one man, one rifle, 3 shots. Simple, clean, final. But the shocking detail. The commission leaned on one idea so unbelievable it became infamous. The magic bullet theory. According to the report, a single bullet entered Kennedy's back, exited his throat, struck Governor Connally in the chest, shattered his wrist, and lodged in his thigh, all while emerging almost perfectly intact. And here's the problem. Even seasoned ballistics experts called it impossible. Americans didn't buy it. How could a broke ex-Marine pull off what military sharpshooters said was nearly impossible? Why did so many eyewitnesses swear they heard shots from multiple directions? Why was Oswald killed before he could testify? The commission said it was case closed, but the public smelled a cover-up. And it gets even stranger. Decades later, classified files revealed the CIA withheld critical information from the Warren Commission, fueling suspicion that the truth was buried on purpose. The chilling twist? Instead of ending conspiracy theories, the Warren report became the spark that kept them alive, and the deeper researchers dug, the uglier it got because the list of possible suspects stretched from the mafia to the highest levels of government. The assassination didn't just kill a president, it shattered the soul of America. November 22, 1963, was the day the dream of Camelot died in a pool of blood on the streets of Dallas. But what followed over the next 3 days was almost worse. The shocking detail? Millions of people didn't just mourn Kennedy. They felt like their entire future had been stolen. In Washington, the White House became a shrine. Outside, crowds gathered day and night, standing silently in the cold November air, their tears freezing on their cheeks. Strangers held candles. Families clutched newspapers that screamed one word: assassinated. People who had never met Kennedy sobbed uncontrollably, as if they had lost their own brother or father. And the heartbreaking truth, for many, they had. Kennedy wasn't just a politician, he was the symbol of hope, youth, and possibility. Jackie Kennedy embodied that grief more than anyone. Still wearing her blood-stained pink Chanel suit, she refused to take it off. Nurses and aides begged her to change, but she whispered the chilling words, "I want them to see what they did to Jack." That suit became an unshakable image, the First Lady, stoic and silent, her dignity unbroken, her clothing a canvas of horror. The disturbing twist? That suit has never been washed, locked away in the National Archives, too painful for the world to see. 3 days later, November 25th, the funeral began. The black-draped caisson carried Kennedy's flag-covered coffin through the streets of Washington, drawn by 6 white horses. The muffled drums echoed across the city, each beat a reminder of what had been lost. Behind the coffin, Jackie walked on foot, holding the hands of her children. She was pale, composed, a living monument to grief. And the most unforgettable image? Her son, John Jr., just 3 years old, stopping to raise his tiny hand in a salute as his father's coffin passed. That salute, innocent, pure, devastating, became the eternal symbol of America's broken heart. Leaders from across the world joined the procession. Princes, kings, presidents, prime ministers, enemies and allies alike walked side by side in silence. The Soviet Union, locked in a Cold War with Kennedy's America, still sent its representatives. France's Charles de Gaulle, towering and grim, marched at Jackie's side. It was a moment of unity unlike anything before or since. But the bitter irony? While the world mourned, America itself was already splintering into doubt and suspicion. Televisions broadcast the funeral into nearly every home. Schools were closed, businesses silent, factories stilled. For 4 days, the United States lived in a trance of mourning. Children asked their parents why the president was gone. Parents had no answers. Families sat in their living rooms watching history's most public display of grief. The darkest detail: for many Americans, this was the first time death entered their homes through a screen, and it felt like it had stolen their future. And yet, beneath the grief was something else. Whispers, questions, suspicions. Why Dallas? Why so many enemies? Why an open car? Why Oswald? Why Ruby? The official answers didn't feel enough. The cruelest twist? Even as Kennedy was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, with an eternal flame lit in his honor, the flame of conspiracy had already begun to burn. Because grief fades, but suspicion doesn't, and for millions of Americans, the question of who really killed Kennedy became a wound that would never heal. If Oswald really acted alone, then why has the world spent 60 years searching for the truth? That's the haunting question that won't go away. The Warren Commission insisted. 3 shots, 1 man, no conspiracy. But the moment the report was published, America pushed back. And the disturbing reality, the official story raised more suspicion than it silenced. Let's start with the infamous magic bullet theory. According to the commission, one bullet entered Kennedy's back, exited through his throat, struck Governor Connolly's chest, shattered his wrist, and lodged in his thigh, all while emerging in pristine condition. But wait, how can one bullet cause 7 wounds in 2 men, bounce around like a pinball, and still come out looking untouched? Ballistics, experts, doctors, even members of Congress called it absurd. The bullet didn't just bend physics, it shattered trust in the investigation, and that's only the beginning. Witnesses in Dealey Plaza swore they heard shots from the grassy knoll. Some even claimed they saw a puff of smoke or a figure behind the fence. Police rushed the area immediately after the shooting but found nothing. The darkest part? Dozens of eyewitnesses were ignored by the commission, their testimonies buried in footnotes. Then there's Oswald himself, a broke warehouse worker with a cheap mail-order rifle, pulling off one of the most difficult shots imaginable. Military sharpshooters later tried to replicate Oswald's alleged feat, and most couldn't do it. So the terrifying question remains, did Oswald even have the skill to kill Kennedy? And what about Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner with mob ties who just happened to be in the police basement with a loaded gun, live on national television? Ruby claimed it was about avenging Jackie, but to many, it looked like silencing the patsy before he could talk. Here's the nightmare fuel. Ruby himself would later say there was more to the story, but he died in prison before explaining what he meant. The CIA, the Mafia, Cuban exiles, Soviet agents, even whispers of Lyndon Johnson. The theories spiraled out of control, each one pointing to powerful groups who had a motive and who stood to benefit from Kennedy's death. Files that could have shed light were locked away for decades, and when they were finally released, huge sections were blacked out. The chilling twist? The U.S. government itself seemed determined to keep the full truth in the dark. Polls show the majority of Americans still don't believe the official story. More than half are convinced there was a conspiracy. Books, documentaries, films, endless debates, all circling the same unanswerable question: who really killed JFK? And why? But the craziest part? Every time we think we're close to the truth, new files, new witnesses, new theories pull us further away. The story is a maze with no exit, a puzzle with missing pieces, a wound that never closes. Kennedy's assassination wasn't just a murder. It was the birth of modern conspiracy culture, the moment America learned not to trust its own government. And the darkest irony, 60 years later, we're still asking the same question that echoed through Dealey Plaza that day. Was it really just Oswald, or was the truth buried with him? The assassination of John F. Kennedy wasn't just the death of a man, it was the death of America's innocence. Before November 22, 1963, the country believed in its leaders, in its institutions, in its future. After Dallas, everything changed. The horrifying truth: Camelot ended not with a crown passed on, but with a young president's blood splattered across his wife's suit. Kennedy's death left scars deeper than politics. It shattered trust. It fueled suspicion. It launched an era where every tragedy, every secret, every government action was questioned. The assassination wasn't just a crime, it was the birth of conspiracy culture, the moment millions realized the truth might never be what they were told. Jackie carried the weight of that day forever. She guarded the memory of her husband, raising their children in the shadow of loss. John Jr., who saluted his father's coffin at 3 years old, would grow up haunted by the legacy of a man he barely knew. The eternal flame at Arlington Cemetery became a symbol not just of Kennedy's life, but of a dream cut short. But the ripple effects went further. Lyndon Johnson inherited the presidency with the Vietnam War looming. The civil rights movement collided with violence in the streets. Distrust in government deepened until it exploded in the scandals of the 1970s. And here's the most haunting twist. Historians argue that the road from Dallas led directly to the cynicism that defines modern America. Even today, when people see the Zapruder film, those shocking, gruesome frames of Kennedy's final seconds, they don't just see a president dying. They see the moment a nation realized nothing was safe, not even hope itself. And the chilling part? 60 years later, we still don't know the full truth. Maybe we never will. Because the assassination of John F. Kennedy wasn't just a murder. It was the day America's dream was executed in broad daylight.